فهؤلاء الذين يحاولون أن يسهلوا في أمر المبتدعة وأمر المنحرفين يجب أن يحذروا، فخطرهم على أهل السنة والسلفيين أشد من خطر أهل البدع الظاهرين على أهل السنة. فالله معشر الأبناء في التمسك بالسنة الصحيحة عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين، نبينا وقدوتنا وقرة أعيننا محمد بن عبد الله الهادي الأمين، وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، ومن سار على هديهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. To address the points that the brother mentioned regarding the issue of Tahir Wyatt and his affair not being clear. First and foremost, the affair of Tahir Wyatt is crystal clear for the one who knows and understands the Salafi manhaj and the Salafi principles. The only one who will be confused regarding the affair of Tahir Wyatt is one who is confused about the principles of Salafiyah and how to apply them and how to understand them and what to do when these types of confusions arise. However, his affair specifically is crystal clear, like I said, for the one who understands and knows the Salafi principles. And I'm going to address those as they come bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and inshaAllah ta'ala it'll be crystal clear after this clarification. The first point being, as many always use to defend Tahir, is the fact that he has studied under the scholars and that he carries a PhD, and so that is evidence for his knowledge and evidence that he should be taken from. Right? That is the first thing that they use. Number one, the argument here is not that Tahir Wyatt is ignorant. The argument is not that Tahir Wyatt has never studied. The argument is not that he has never studied under the scholars or that he is not known to the scholars. So to use the PhD and the fact that he has studied as an evidence to take from him is an irrelevant and an erroneous argument, because that is not the argument to begin with. So Tahir Wyatt has studied, he has a PhD, he has taught in seasonal times in the Prophet's masjid. Those affairs are not and have never been evidences for one's Salafiyah, nor for one's or for one to take from that individual. There are people that teach in the Prophet's masjid who are considered scholars, who are deviants and have aqeedah issues, and they're not taking from, and they've been refuted by scholars. There are those who carry PhDs, the likes of Yusuf al-Qardawi, who is a known deviant and an ikhwani. There are many who hold PhDs, however those PhDs do not tell us whether they are Salafi or not. It simply means that they attained a PhD. It does not mean that is an evidence for one's Salafiyah or for one's qualification to be teaching others, meaning from the side of from the angle of those who are seeking knowledge. It is not an evidence, or it is not a Salafi criteria that one has a PhD that we now take from him. So that is to clarify that part. All of those arguments that people use in order to say, oh, why would we not take from Tahir? He's more qualified than anyone else in the West. He carries a PhD, and other du'at and other students do not. That is not an evidence. Because the argument, once again, is not that he is ignorant or that he does not have a PhD. or that he did not study in the Islamic University of Al-Madinah. That is not the argument. Therefore, to respond with he has this and he has that and he has done this will not give you the leeway or the permission to take from anyone, whether Tahir or anyone else. That is the first point. Inshallah, that is clear. We have Salafi criteria. We take from the Salafi manhaj on who we take our deen from. The Salaf, Muhammad bin Sirin, rahimahullah, has stated the famous and well-known statement, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ دِينٌ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ, indeed this knowledge of the deen, of the religion of al-Islam, deen. Inna hadha al-ilm deenun. This knowledge is religion. And he did not say, look to who you take your ilm from. He said, فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. When you are looking to who you are going to take knowledge from, you have to be conscious of the fact that you are taking your religion from this person, and then you are, whatever this person teaches you, is what you are going to be worshipping your Lord with. It is the belief that you are going to die with and that you are going to stand in front of your Lord with. And so, لَيْسَ الْأَمْرُ يعني هَيِّن. The affair is not an easy affair or something that should be taken lightly. This is a serious affair, so you have to take it seriously. Emotions need to be put aside. Arguments that are baseless and have no basis in the Salafi manhaj have to be put aside. Any type of affiliation or love or bias or anything like that, not saying that anyone has that, but all of those things have to be put aside, and one has to be conscious of the fact that they are going to be taking their religion from this person. And so you should value your religion, value your akhirah, when you are deciding who you are going to be taking your knowledge from. And don't dismiss things that you see with feeble arguments and weak arguments, like someone has praised or this one has said this and the affair is not clear. Think about your akhirah. Before you understand the details of the situation, the least that you can say is that this affair is not clear. I should protect my religion and stay away, since I know some of these things go against the Salafi manhaj that he's doing. But to argue for the fact that he should be taken from, or no one should be speaking about him, etc., etc., when you yourself see the errors, that is not a correct methodology, nor is it in agreement with the principles of Islam. If you have a doubt, you stay away from that matter. You do not argue for the fact that you should continue to be taking from the person. So inshallah, that is the first point, and I'll address the second point now bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The second point that was mentioned is the fact that there are scholars who are upon the Salafi manhaj who have praised Tahir Wyatt. And that is correct. There are Salafi scholars that have praised Tahir Wyatt in the past. Now, what do we do when a scholar has praised an individual? When a scholar has praised an individual, what does that mean exactly? The fact that a scholar praises someone. Do the scholars know the unseen and know what the person is up to all the time? Or do they praise the person based on what is apparent from them? Meaning what the person shows to that scholar while he is with them. Likewise, what has to also be considered is the time that the scholars praised Tahir Wyatt was the time that he was in Medina with them. And so the things that we are seeing from him today were not there at that time. And so you have to look at the timeline of those praises. That's the first point. The time that they praised Tahir Wyatt is when he was a student there, showing Salafiyah, the Sunnah being apparent from him, whatever they discuss, and things like that. That is what the scholar bases his praise on. And one thing that was mentioned is that Shaykh Suleiman al-Ruhayli is the one that praised Tahir, and that is incorrect. That is incorrect. I'm not aware of a praise of Sheikh Suleiman ar-ruhayli for Tahir Wyatt. What we know of the most, well-known praise for him is from Sheikh Sālih al-Suhaimi. And so that has to be noted. That correction has to be noted. The praise for Tahir Wyatt is from Sheikh Sālih al-Suhaimi. As the brother posted, he posted the video of it in the group. Now, when a scholar praises an individual, and we see that which opposes that praise from him, do we stick to the praise and say no one can say nothing? Since the scholar praised, and the laymen are not qualified, and nor are the students, and then we start comparing the level of the students to the level of the scholar. That, in reality, is the manhaj of the Sa'afiq that we've been warning against. So that is why I mentioned, what have we benefited from the manhaj of the Sa'afiq if we ourselves are repeating their same rhetoric and their same manhaj? We do not take the words of the scholars and the praises of the scholars and the criticisms of the scholars as revelations sent from above the seven heavens. The statements of the scholars are not evidence in and of themselves. They themselves require evidence. And so the praise of a scholar for an individual requires evidence. It requires us to see that praise manifest itself on that individual. Is that person actually deserving of that praise based on what we see? Meaning, if the individual, his condition and what he is doing is not in agreement with the praise that he has received from a scholar, we do not look to that praise. No matter how great that scholar is, no matter how important that scholar is, no matter how much we love that scholar, no matter how much we respect that scholar, his praise now disagrees and is not in agreement with the reality of the affairs. And that is what we've been learning from the fitnah of the Sa'afiq in reality. Because Shaykh Rabi' praises asbabs in these individuals. Shaykh Ubaid praises asbabs and the rest of these individuals that we know. Do those praises actually reflect the reality of these individuals? No. And that is why we rejected their praises for them. And so why is it any different for Tahir Wyatt? Asbabs and Germantown and all these other people and Troy, etc., we've seen their fitnah, we've seen their extremism, we've seen their oppression on Salafis, clear Salafis. And so when scholars praised them, we didn't accept it, based on the principle that if the person is praised by a Salafi scholar, and we see from their actions and from their speech and from their behavior that which opposes that praise from that scholar, we respectfully do not accept that praise for them. Rather, we base our position regarding these individuals on what they show from us. And that is how Islam is, that is how we deal with people in Islam. We deal with what is on the apparent. The apparent, what we see from the person, is how we judge them. The praise of a scholar cannot remove what we see. And what we see from the individual, if there are evidences for it, then that is what we're obligated as Salafis, as Muslims, to follow. And it is not permissible for us to follow the praise of any scholar. And there is a confusion. The second point that I'd like to clarify is that there is a confusion with regards to what the praise of a scholar actually means. When a scholar praises someone, and then we see from the individual that which opposes the Salafi manhaj, we assume that the scholar is aware of what this person is doing. Otherwise, why would he praise them? The reality is, if our deen is only based on what we see on YouTube, and we don't know the history, and we don't know the timeline of anything, these types of confusions will arise. To clarify, Shaykh Sālih al-Suhaimi praised Tahir Wyatt years ago. Now we see these things today. The past couple of years, we've been seeing what Tahir Wyatt is up to. Now we say, well, the scholar praised him, so how do we reject that praise? Well, based on the timeline, we see that the scholar praised Tahir Wyatt years before these things became apparent, and now we see these things. And so to make the connection and to believe that the praise for Tahir is a new one, and that scholar who praised them while knowing that he is doing the things that he's doing, that is something that the one who has that mentality or that belief has no evidence for. And it's an argument that they themselves make up for themselves, and it's a shubha, it's a doubt. It is a doubt that has no basis whatsoever, and it is not evidence. It is not evidence. And so that notion that many of the brothers have from the common folk, from the general folk, is that when they see these praises, they assume, and it's an inaccurate assumption and speculation, they assume that the scholar who praised them is actually aware of everything that the person is doing, which is incorrect. Just like the Sa'afiqah. Just like the Sa'afiqah that are in Medina, that Shaykh Rabi' continues to defend and continues to praise, likewise Shaykh Ubaid. They do so while these individuals are around them, and they may be seeing them every other day. However, do those individuals show them what the rest of the world is seeing? No. And so we have to put the ulama or the words of the ulama on the proper scales. We have to understand that a scholar is not infallible and does not see the unseen. And so when they praise someone based on what they see from him, not based on anything else. They only praise the individual based on what they see, and they do not have the ability to praise him based on anything beyond that. And so you have to take the praises of the scholars in that way, and not to believe that the scholar knows the intricacies and the ins and outs of every single affair of an individual, and then they still praise him. No, because then you will be accusing that scholar of approving of those falsehoods of that individual, and that is bad adab with the ulama. Meaning, if you believe that Shaykh Sālih al-Suhaimi still praises Tahir Wyatt while he's doing the things that he's doing today, that means you have bad thoughts of the scholar, and you believe that a scholar would praise someone, a Salafi scholar would praise someone knowing the falsehood that he's now upon, or the things that he's currently doing. And so that has to be paid attention to and considered. The third point is that there are no scholars who have criticized Tahir Wyatt. That there are no scholars who have criticized Tahir Wyatt, and that is incorrect. A long time ago, probably over a decade, Shaykh Rabi' ibn Hadi al-Madkhali, hafidhahullah, criticized Tahir Wyatt for him choosing to remain unclear. Shaykh Rabi' asked him to clarify certain things, he chose not to. And he went to Shaykh Sālih al-Suhaimi and complained about it. And Shaykh Sālih al-Suhaimi told him not to do it. And he used that as his shield and his scapegoat, not to clarify things that any Salafi would have no problem clarifying. His positions regarding certain innovators, etc. He chose not to do it, and he was criticized by Shaykh Rabi' ibn Hadi. Likewise, Shaykh Muhammad bin Hadi himself criticizes Tahir Wyatt and knows his current affair. Likewise, Shaykh Usama al-Utaybi, throughout this fitnah of the Sa'afiqah, I believe about a year ago, he has also criticized Tahir Wyatt and others, meaning those who are aware of his affair, his current affair, have criticized him. And so it is not accurate to say that a scholar, there are no scholars who have criticized Tahir simply because you don't find it translated on YouTube, or even if it's not recorded on the internet. That is not how we judge things, or how we negate the fact that scholars have criticized them. You can say that I'm not aware of a scholar having criticized them, but we cannot say that it does not exist. We have to base things on our own knowledge, and we can't negate the knowledge itself or the fact itself. So that affair, inshallah ta'ala, I don't think requires anything more than that. Tahir Wyatt has been criticized by some of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah wal-jama'ah. And likewise, just to add to that, that all it takes from anyone is to simply gather the current affair, the issues that Tahir Wyatt is doing today, and take it to a Salafi scholar, remove his name, even the scholars who have praised him in the past. Mention the things that he's doing and remove his name and see how they speak about that individual. And then if you tell them afterwards that this is Tahir Wyatt, they won't believe it. And that's how you know that the scholars praise people based on what is apparent from that person and what they've known from that person. And so we cannot base our position based on the knowledge, the knowledge of the scholar, the factual knowledge, meaning not his actual ilm of the Quran and Sunnah. We're nothing in comparison to the ulama in terms of our knowledge of the deen. However, knowledge of facts that happen, of course someone can be more knowledgeable than a scholar. The facts of things that happen, meaning occurrences in the world. You may see something, a scholar does not see it. So you have knowledge of that thing that happened, and a scholar does not have that knowledge of that thing that happened. And if you inform him of it, then he'll speak according to the Quran and Sunnah regarding that affair. And so that's what brothers have to understand. And that point, actually, I'm going to clarify it in more detail in one of the other points, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Point number 4 is Tahir Wyatt's associations and what that means. Regarding, or when looking at the Salafi manhaj, what does the Salafi manhaj say about associating and working with the people of innovation? Now, the asal regarding that issue is that it is not permissible to work with the people of innovation and deviation. That's the asal in the deen. And ijma' of the Salaf, it is consensus of the Imams of the Salaf that boycotting and separating oneself from the people of innovation, those who have a clear manhaj and a clear way that opposes the Salafi manhaj, that it is not permissible for one to work with them and give da'wah alongside them and befriend them and sit with them and walk alongside them, etc. One frees themselves from them, one warns against their deviations by name, their groups, etc. That is the asl in the deen. Now, there are scholars who, due to a maslahah that they see a greater good at times, and this is their ijtihad. And a point that I would like to clarify is that the ijtihad of a scholar weighing harms and benefits and looking into the affair and giving a fatwa from himself, does not change the Salafi manhaj. That's number 1. Nor does it change that the fact that it is an ijma', a consensus amongst the Salaf, it does not change that fact. So we have to look at it like this. You do not argue for the case of, oh, well, he's doing it, a scholar said so. Yes, the scholar, that's his ijtihad. That scholar, if he is correct in his verdict, then he is rewarded twice. And if he is wrong in his verdict, then he is rewarded once. However, that does not change the Salafi manhaj for us. The Salafi manhaj remains that it is a consensus amongst the Salaf that one free himself and separate himself from the people of innovation, and that he does not is not friendly with them and does not work with them, etc. That is the asal. Why is that the case? Why was that the case of the Salaf? You have statements from the Imams of the Salaf that are very harsh in showing their dislike and their disapproval and their harsh position towards the people of innovation. You would see some of the Salaf saying that if you see an innovator on one side of this road, walk on the other side. You would see some of them saying that I would rather eat with and sit with swine and monkeys or apes than sitting with a person of innovation or al-Mu'tazili, etc. So the position of the Salaf towards innovators was a harsh position, and that is the asl. Now, when certain scholars mention that it is okay to go to certain places in order to call them to the truth, then one must take that fatwa if they are actually qualified to do so and have the knowledge and are firm in the Salafi manhaj and clear upon Salafiyah, that they're going to go there and clarify the truth to those people. Now, one who is not clear and when he goes to these places does not clarify the Salafi manhaj at all, even when he's not at those places, you don't see on his YouTube channel or anywhere else him ever clarifying the Salafi manhaj, him ever talking about the main principles of Salafiyah, him never addressing the groups and the deviations that exist today in America, for example, or in the West, or in the Muslim world, or in the world today. Those who ascribe to Islam and even to the Sunnah sometimes, however, are very far from it and are misguiding the Muslims. Tahir Wyatt is not an individual who deals with those things. And so if you were to look at his classes, general classes on Aqeedah topics, general classes on fiqh topics or usul al-fiqh topics, yes, this is knowledge, but this is not what shows the Salafi manhaj. And so if you were to look at his list of lectures and classes, you would not be able to tell him apart from any other Hizbi who gives classes, right? On top of that, him confusing the people even more with his associations, those who he mixes with. And it's funny that what people are confused about is the fact that scholars have praised him, and you will never see him mentioning those scholars in his classes, in his more recent classes, referring to them. You won't find that anymore. Those who he studied with, he's no longer even referring back to them or telling the people to take from them, or etc., etc. And so that's a very important point to also look at too. That Tahir left Medina, came back to America, and is on a completely other manhaj altogether, alongside Umar Suleiman, alongside the Yaqeen Institute that is full of people who call to kufr in the name of Islam. Yes, kufr. Affairs that, if one were to believe them, removes you from the fold of Islam altogether. Tahir Wyatt is a member of the Yaqeen Institute, where individuals like Jonathan Brown are a part of. He takes pictures alongside him. I have never heard one word from Tahir Wyatt in criticism of that individual. That is an individual who said that he calls to and encourages the slander and the openly speaking against the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is open kufr. That's the type of people that Tahir Wyatt associates with and is a part of the same institute. Umar Suleiman standing up for LGBTQ. That is something fundamentally wrong and against our religion, opposes our religion. Protests, defending people like Salman al-Auda and Safar al-Hawali, and criticizing the governments, Islamic governments, and the government of Saudi Arabia. Tahir Wyatt feels comfortable in associating with an individual like that, sitting side by side with him, never saying a word against him, working alongside him. And so how can we compare that to what the scholars of Ahl Sunnah do when they go to certain countries that may have some deviations in the message that they go to, and they go and they clarify Tawheed to them and warn them from shirk, which is what you're supposed to do. Tahir Wyatt does not do that. He associates with these people, and you cannot tell between him and them. When he is speaking, if you look at whatever he's done for the Yaqeen Institute, go look at that and see if he's talking about Tawheed or shirk or Sunnah or following the manhaj of the Salaf. None of that. You'll never find any of that. And so it's general topics that will cater to all types of Muslims and all types of beliefs. And that is what the Ikhwani methodology is. That is what the Ikhwani methodology is. That we unite upon what we agree upon, and that we keep quiet about that which we differ upon. And so it is not an evidence to say now, oh yeah, but Tahir doesn't believe what those individuals believe, because that is the Ikhwani manhaj anyways. They do not speak about the things that they differ over. And if you look at the objective or the mission of that Yaqeen Institute, they actually crystal clear, in clear words, say that everyone here may have different opinions, though those members of the Yaqeen Institute, and that they do not basically oppose one another or go into those controversial issues, meaning they don't refute one another, they don't clarify that is actually the mission. How is that Salafiyah? That is a fundamental violation of the Salafi methodology and the deen that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. But Tahir Wyatt is a part of it. And so what does the praise of a scholar do for him when this is his condition? This is what we have to look at, brothers. Barakallahu feekum. Point number 5 is, what do we do when we see Salafi scholars praising an individual and then we see that which opposes that praise from that individual? So I'll just briefly deal with that in terms of principles, because we previously touched on it a bit in one of the other points. But what one does in that situation is that, for example, a Salafi scholar will praise someone, and then we see that which opposes that praise. We start seeing, oppositions to the Salafi manhaj from that individual, whether it be associations with people of innovation, whether it be certain statements that oppose the Salafi methodology and things like that. Once we start seeing that individual, it is upon him to clarify himself. He's been criticized and refuted, and those matters have been mentioned about him many times. He refuses to clarify anything. Many times he's been criticized, Tahir Wyatt, for the things that he does. Never does he clarify, never does he defend or mention an evidence for what he's doing or anything like that, right? He'll mention, or people who defend him will mention the general thing that the scholars say, okay, going to the people of innovation to call them to the truth is okay. Using that as your smokescreen for what you're doing, that is not correct. And that's why I clarified previously that what he does and what the scholars do are not the same. So what do you do when a Salafi scholar praises an individual that we start to see deviations from? We at the least stop taking from that individual up until he himself clarifies and retracts and makes tawbah from the things that he is upon. The Salafi, a clear Salafi, one of the signs of a Salafi that distinguishes a Salafi from all of the other sects is the fact that he is clear. And that is even not only a Salafi, but the Salafi methodology, in comparison with the Khawarij, in comparison with the people of Tamyi', those who water down the principles to accommodate innovators and innovations and different beliefs, and in order to widen and broaden the scope and the circle of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, to include people who have deviations and to include this one and that one, right? Those individuals or those sects and those groups are all unclear. They work behind closed doors. Their message isn't clear. You have confusion, right? But the Salafi methodology is crystal clear. Just like the narration from Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, where he said, rahimahullah, that if you see a group of people yatanajown, meaning they come together in secret, like at night, for example, they come together in order to speak about affairs secretly, away from the Ammah, away from the general people, meaning their manhaj is a manhaj of secrecy and things that happen behind closed doors, just like the Sa'afiqah, just like the Khawarij, just like the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, just like everyone else, that they hide their manhaj and what they actually believe behind closed doors, and what their agenda is behind closed doors is not what they present to the people. Umar bin Abdul Aziz said that know that they are people who are upon dalalah, misguidance, and so use that scale for all of the different groups that exist in the world today. The only ones who don't fit that description are the true Salafis, who what they say in private is the same as what they present to the people publicly. Right? So these types of people who they'll tell you, oh, I believe one thing, but then everything you see that they're doing publicly opposes exactly what they believe, that is not Salafiyah. And so when a scholar from Ahl Sunnah praises an individual, he praises him based on what that individual showed him at the time that he knew him. And us, as Salafis who know the Salafi manhaj, we do not use that praise in order to continue to stick to an individual, because then we would have opposed the truth. Then we would have opposed the truth, and we would have raised the statement of that scholar above the truth, which is what the Sa'afiqah do. And so if we ourselves believe that we are free from the methodology of the Sa'afiqah, where we raise the scholars above their place, and we raise the statements of the scholars above their place and above the manhaj of the Salaf, then we are obligated to stay away. We are obligated to follow, the truth, and not follow the statement of a scholar when it does not agree with the reality of the affairs. The sixth point is how are praises from Salafi scholars understood, and what are they based on? As we mentioned previously, that the scholar, when they praise, in the science of Jarh wa Ta'deel first and foremost, the science of Jarh wa Ta'deel, which is the science of praising individuals and disparaging individuals, meaning criticizing individuals. Praising in order to encourage taking from the person, accepting their reports and taking knowledge from them, and disparaging them in the sense of not taking their reports, labeling them not trustworthy, or that their report and their narration not being taken, or their testimony, and likewise knowledge not being taken from them. And so that science is a science that is found within the methodology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is taken from the science of Mustalah al-Hadith, how the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was preserved for us. Now, regarding the principle of praise and criticism, the asl is that if you have praise and criticism, meaning both praise and criticism for a specific individual, then the criticism takes precedence over that praise. The criticism takes precedence over that praise. And why is that? That is because the scholar who praises an individual has a limited knowledge of that individual, meaning what they are praising that person for is only based on the information they have about that person and what they've seen from that person. They don't know anything beyond that. And so their praise is relative to themselves, and it does not give you the full story. However, the criticism is proof of further knowledge or more knowledge about the individual. And so as the scholars of Jarh wa Ta'deel say, that the one who is criticizing عنده زيادة علم على من يزكي, the one who is criticizing an individual has more knowledge about the individual than the one who is praising. And that is a fact, because the fact that the scholar who is praising praises based on what he knows, if he were, as long as they're both Salafi scholars, if he were to have the knowledge of the one who is criticizing, he would likewise criticize. He would not defend him while knowing the criticism. And so that is why the scholars say that the one who is criticizing has knowledge that has either missed or that the other scholar has not come across. And that is sometimes due to the other scholar, meaning maybe dealing with the person more or associated with him more, so he saw from him what the other did not see from him. or information has reached him about him that has not reached the other scholar, and so therefore the criticism takes precedence over the praise. Now, when can the praise be accepted and the criticism be rejected? If the criticism is based on inaccuracies or information that is not correct, or it is exaggerated, for example, and then the other scholar is aware of the criticism and defends the one who is being criticized against that exact criticism. Not he defends him in general, not that he praises him in general, no, that he directly deal with the criticisms against the person. So the video that was posted earlier with Sheikh Sālih Suhaimi and him taking Abu Khadija, etc., etc., Abu Khadija is not someone that we take our criticisms from. Right? Abu Khadija is not someone who we take our criticisms from. Sheikh Sālih Suhaimi mentioned a story where he met Abu Khadija and he asked him for evidence against Tahir. The lack of the fact that Abu Khadija was not able to present accurate evidences against Tahir that convinced Sheikh Sālih Suhaimi is not a proof that it doesn't exist. You have to understand that point. Sheikh Sālih Suhaimi defended Tahir based on the knowledge that he has of him. Now, Abu Khadija failed to present the correct information. He said that he has associations with Halabi or whatever the case is, and the Shaykh said that's wrong. Okay, so Abu Khadija failed in presenting the evidences. However, what we know today, of all the things that we see, it's public information. It is not something hidden that one person knows and it's spread and there's rumors spreading. No, it is crystal clear. He is open about it. He does not even hide it. His associations and where he goes and things like that. So, you see him on a Zoom video with Suleiman saying, oh, Sheikh Omar, and things like that. Suleiman is someone that you say Sheikh to. Now, the principle is that when we have a general praise of a scholar and we have a criticism on an individual, whether it be from a scholar or whether it be from a student of knowledge who knows these principles and knows and has the knowledge to refute the deviations, then it is accepted. It is accepted. And the praise is not accepted. And that is how we deal with praises from scholars, general praises for scholars, when we have other information about the individual that opposes that praise. That is how we deal with that issue. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Brother made a point where it was said that the scholars are more knowledgeable than anyone in this group. And that is correct. The scholars of al-Islam are more knowledgeable than anyone in this group. All of the students, regardless of their ages, and the du'at, the scholars are more knowledgeable of us than us. However, what does that mean exactly? The scholar being more knowledgeable about the Quran and the Sunnah and the rulings pertaining to al-Islam and understanding the Salafi manhaj better than us, does that mean that a student cannot know of an affair that has occurred somewhere in America, for example, and then that scholar not know of it? Because that is the very manhaj of the Sa'afiqah. Every time you refute them for something that the Sa'afiqah in Saudi were doing, they would, and then the scholar like Sheikh Rabi' or Sheikh Ubaid would reject it. They would say, oh, are you more knowledgeable than Sheikh Rabi' and Sheikh Ubaid? How can you know of these individuals' deviations and they not know? And so how are we any different than the Sa'afiqah if we're making those same statements? Brothers, I want to advise and clarify. I want to advise the brothers who have understood and who have gone through this fitnah of the Sa'afiqah that it is not, it would have been worth nothing to have gone through that fitnah and have left the places that we've left, many of us, and boycotted the people that we are not boycotting and we no longer associate with, if we still carry their manhaj, or if we still have not understood the intricate matters that fitnah clarified. Meaning we were not boycotting personalities, we were boycotting an ideology of ghulu, of extremism, and of manipulating and twisting principles of salafiyah, and making statements that in and of themselves are true, however falsehood is intended by them. And so the statement that the scholars are more knowledgeable than anyone else, in order to use that as a proof that no one here can talk about an issue, that is not correct, nor is it in agreement with the manhaj of the Salaf. I'll give you one example from the Quran. One example from the Quran whereby someone of less status had knowledge of someone of greater status and knowledge. In the qissa of the Hudhud, the story of the Hudhud and Suleiman alayhi salam, in Surah Al-Nahl. If you read Surah Al-Nahl, you will find the story of the Hudhud, the bird, and Suleiman alayhi salam. Suleiman alayhi salam one day فقد الهدهد, and he could not find the Hudhud. He was missing the Hudhud and he was asking about where it went. And when it returned, when the bird returned, it said to Suleiman alayhi salam that I have, meaning it went away and came back. And it said to Suleiman alayhi salam, after he asked him where it went, he said to Suleiman alayhi salam that I have knowledge of an affair that you do not have knowledge of. Now, if we follow this principle of the scholars are more knowledgeable, so there is no way a student or a layman can ever know something that a scholar cannot know, then there is no way that we would find something like this happening in the Quran, where a bird, which is an animal, can have knowledge of something that Suleiman alayhi salam, a prophet of Allah, did not have knowledge of. How is it that a bird could have knowledge of something that Suleiman alayhi salam, who is a prophet of Allah, who is receiving wahy, who is guided by Allah, who has knowledge that comes from Allah, right, and abilities that regular people do not have, something was hidden from him alayhi salam, but a bird who was less status obviously than him, of less status, knew about an affair. And the affair that the Hudhud knew about was the affair of Saba and the people who would worship the sun. And so that Hudhud brought that information to Suleiman alayhi salam. Now, is there a scholar on this earth or that has ever lived that has the knowledge of Suleiman alayhi salam and is of the status of Suleiman alayhi salam? Never. So, if it can be possible that Suleiman alayhi salam, something could have been hidden from him, and that a bird could have known it, then how can we say that a student cannot speak, or a student cannot know, or a layman cannot know, or a layman cannot speak because the scholars have spoken or a scholar has said something? That understanding is an understanding that goes against the Quran and the Sunnah and the manhaj of the Salaf. And we have many examples throughout time where the statement of a great scholar was rejected for the statement of a lesser great scholar or a scholar of lesser status. That has happened throughout the history of Islam. And so it is a flawed understanding to believe that someone cannot get something right, meaning a student of knowledge who studied and understands, even if his general knowledge is not at the level of the greater scholar, but the scholar is still a human being and can miss the mark. He's a human being. And so yes, in general, the scholars are more knowledgeable than the students of knowledge, However, the student of knowledge can sometimes know of an affair that the scholar may not know of. And that is even with regards to the affairs of ilm, meaning the meaning of the Quran, the meaning of the Sunnah, the understanding of this hadith, the understanding of this verse. A scholar may sometimes not know it, and a student can benefit him and say, Shaykh, I read such and such, and this is what I understood, and the Shaykh will say, Jazakallahu khair. That is with regards to knowledge. However, when it comes to affairs of occurrences, something happened somewhere, the factual events that happened, meaning Tahir did such and such, that has nothing to do with the knowledge, the general knowledge of the deen. That has to do with whether it happened or not, and who saw it and who did not see it. So the argument of the scholar being more knowledgeable does not even enter into this affair. Is that understood? The knowledge of the scholar of the Sharia, of the legislation of Islam, does not enter into the affair of one of us seeing Tahir do something that opposes the Sunnah. Especially when it's in the English language. We understand the English language. The scholars do not understand the English language. We will hear something that he says. We know that it goes against the Salafi methodology. And if you see a scholar that has praised them, and you say, Shaykh Tahir said such and such, he said, no, that's not possible. I know him. Okay, you know him, but you heard it with your own ears and saw it with your own eyes. So the negation of that scholar of the event, how does that have an effect on what you actually saw? Do you now say to yourself, okay, well, if the scholar is saying that he knows Tahir and Tahir never did it, so now I have to deny what I myself witnessed? No. Once again, if you do that, and if you believe that is what the scholars are here for, and that is what the status of the scholars is, then we're no different than the Sufis, who believe that the reality of what goes on actually isn't what's happening, but their scholars are the ones who are aware of the actual reality of life and see the unseen, etc., etc. No, the scholars do not have that status. When it comes to affairs of witnessing and testimony and etc., all that is required is the person to be trustworthy and that the report be accurate and it is accepted, whether a scholar agrees with it or not. Just like a couple of days ago when someone asked about Malcolm X, and a brother said that he died upon Sunni Islam, a brother jumped up and said, who from the scholars preceded you in that? Well, this is not a verse in the Quran or a hadith for a scholar to precede him in it. That understanding has to be corrected. When we say what scholar preceded you in this, that is with regards to the ahkam of the deen, an opinion in the religion, so on and so forth. However, a factual event or a factual thing, that is not what is meant by what scholar preceded you. You know, so that is what has to be understood. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. Point number 8 is properly understanding the fitnah of the sa'afiqah and not mixing it up with other affairs. It is known that this fitnah, this past fitnah, has caused a lot of confusion. It has clarified many things for a lot of brothers, especially those in the West. However, it has also caused many brothers to now start to not trust the words of either students or of scholars as they used to. And what I mean by that is some of the principles that we've been refuting the Sa'afiqah for, such as them speaking about people without evidence, such as them slandering the scholars, right? Such as them twisting and flipping some of the principles of Salafiyah. Now there are brothers who take that situation that is with the Sa'afiqah, and anytime that they see someone mention something about another person, they believe it's the same thing that was happening with the Sa'afiqah. And so they jump up and say, we don't take nothing without evidence. Yes, we don't take nothing without evidence, but you need to understand what evidence actually is when it comes to mentioning things about different people. Now, it's different scenarios. If a Salafi is criticizing another Salafi for something that he has done, you bring the evidences and you refute that individual with clear-cut evidences, especially if you're trying to remove him from Salafiyah. And that affair, removing him from Salafiyah, depending on what it is that the person has fallen into. For example, if it's mistakes with regards to the Salafi manhaj that can be corrected, then you do not rush to remove the person from Salafiyah. However, if the person now was once known to be Salafi, but has now become an open khariji, crystal clear, calling to takfir and calling to khuruj against the hukam, you don't need a scholar for that to know that this person has now left the Salafi manhaj. So affairs that are clear like that do not require a scholar's ruling, because that person himself has removed himself from the fold of Salafiyah. Secondly, if the person was once Salafi but now has fallen into affairs that oppose the Salafi manhaj, then you refute him as a student who has knowledge of these affairs, refute him and even tell the people not to take from that individual because he may now misguide them. But the removal from Salafiyah, that is left to the scholars. Now, when someone says, for example, Tahir Wyatt does such and such, and then someone jumps up and says, where is your evidence? We're not upon the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah. Not everything is the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah. The manhaj of the Sa'afiqah was that they spoke about clear-cut Salafis who actually had no oppositions, mukhalafat or oppositions to the Salafi manhaj, and they lied about them, and they exaggerated, and then they attributed things to them that did not even exist. You cannot now label everything with this is the way of the Sa'afiqah, simply because you yourself don't have the evidence or you don't know the evidence. It is sufficient to say, Akhi, can you please provide me with the evidence for such and such statement that you made about this person? But to always believe that it is the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah, every time the evidence is not mentioned at the moment, that is not correct. As we mentioned, for example, the affair of Tahir Wyatt, what he's doing is crystal clear, it's all over the place. And so if someone now in this group, for example, or anywhere else says, Tahir Wyatt has such and such and does such and such, say, Akhi, can you provide the evidence? But to say, this is the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah, there is such and such, and people are still upon the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah, and people still have the harshness of no, Tahir Wyatt actually has things that he's done. And the Sa'afiqah accuse people with things that they have not done. So that is not the same as the manhaj of the Sa'afiqah. So we have to understand what the actual issues with the Sa'afiqah were, so that when we see it, we can actually detect it for what it is. But not to label everything, and now be cautious of everything, and now to have doubts about everything that exists around us, and start to believe not that the Salafis that you once knew to be Salafi are not clear, and that they also have issues, and that the Salafi community now has issues. That is waswas from shaitan. That is from the whispers of shaitan. That is not a correct and a just analysis of what is going on. Especially when those who one may think these things of are the main ones who are at the forefront refuting these affairs and refuting these principles and concepts and the extreme nature of the Sa'afiqah, whether they're in the West or in the East. And so one must understand that. And one must also remove emotionalism from the affair. Yes, a lot of brothers have been oppressed. Yes, a lot of brothers have been lied about. Yes, a lot of brothers have gone, lost friends and loved ones, even maybe family members. However, one must strive to remove the emotional aspect from dealing with these affairs, and we have to move past the fitnah of the Sa'afiqah and build ourselves with actual knowledge of the Salafi methodology in the correct manner. It is not sufficient to only know that the Sa'afiqah are in error and misguided. One must also strive to learn their deen and apply apply Salafiyah in its correct way. And so to learn Salafiyah, even if it be from scratch, since a lot of brothers may have learned their Salafiyah from the Sa'afiqah, and so they may have a lot of concepts now that they're struggling to understand. One must now strive to learn and ask about these things, and not to remain upon what they used to be upon, and continuing with their doubts and their misunderstandings for a long time, because it's going to cause you to become weak in your manhaj and to start to look elsewhere to get your religion. Shaitan will make other speakers now more appealing to you, and that is what is happening to people. They are now taking from people and making excuses for people like Mufti Munir, Tahir Wyatt, and others, because of how much they've been harmed by other Salafis. And that is not the solution either. The solution is not to now believe that everyone that the Sa'afiqah ever spoke about is now guided, or they have been oppressed. For example, those who have gone through oppression, for them to now say, oh well, if they oppressed me, they probably oppressed everyone else too. And so now it's okay to take from Tahir, it's okay to take from Mufti, so it's okay to take from so and so and so and so, since those guys apparently show some sort of Salafiyah, and those guys have ghulu, and now these guys are also innocent. That is what a lot of brothers are going through. And I urge the brothers to learn their Salafiyah properly. I urge the brothers to learn their Salafiyah properly, and to not fall into the traps of the shaitan, who's going to lure you to people of deviation due to this emotionalism that you carry with the understanding of the deen. If you try to understand the deen from an emotional aspect, it is going to lead you astray. It is natural, yes, to feel emotional and to feel hurt, obviously, because you've gone through oppression. However, you have to seek refuge in Allah from the shaitan, and have to be sincere in learning your deen in the correct manner and learning the balanced way of as-Salafiyah. But to look at affairs from the eye of emotion is not the way to go, and it is going to lead you astray. Point number 9 is that you have a detailed praise from Sheikh Suleiman ar-ruhayli. The only thing that I would like to clarify there is that it is not from Sheikh Suleiman ar-ruhayli, it is from Sheikh Sālih al-Suhaimi. Sheikh Sālih al-Suhaimi is the one that praised Tahir Wyatt, and it is not Sheikh Suleiman ar-ruhayli. So the reason for clarifying that is so that we do not attribute to scholars that which they are free from. Because someone may now take that and now run with that and spread it and believe that it is accurate. However, that is not the case. And so I'm clarifying that Sheikh Suleiman ar-ruhayli is not the one who praised Tahir. Rather, it is Sheikh Sālih al-Suhaimi who has praised him. And the 10th and final point is in response to the statement, quote, clarity on my first paragraph. I was saying it's not the place for a layman or a student to make a ruling on somebody. Naam. End quote. So now, as I previously clarified, we have to differentiate between a student of knowledge clarifying the affair of an individual whose affair is clear and his opposition to the Salafi methodology is clear, which is going to confuse Salafis, which is evident, from what we're dealing with now. It is incumbent upon the student who has the ability to do that. And to say that it is not the place of the student to do that is incorrect and has no basis in the Salafi manhaj. However, when we are talking about rulings, yes, rulings are left for the scholars. However, refutations and criticisms are done by the student, if the student has the ability and the evidence of the deviation of the individual that he's refuting, and likewise the evidence from the Quran and Sunnah and the manhaj of the Salaf and the statements of the Salaf to refute this individual in order to clarify to the Muslims so that they don't fall into those things. Then one cannot say that a student has no place to do that. One cannot say that, because that has no basis in the Salafi manhaj. However, the one who, when we're looking for a ruling on an individual, and from what I've seen in this group, I have not seen someone make a ruling on him. A ruling meaning to say that he is an innovator, or that he is from this such and such group, meaning a sect. I have not seen that happen in this group as of yet. And so that is left for the scholars. One can take the evidences on Tahir, take it to a scholar, and if they would like a ruling from a scholar, get that ruling from the scholar. However, his affair, whether someone, because it was mentioned before in New York and in New Jersey and Philly, that the affair is not clear. As I started in the beginning, his affair is crystal clear. His affair is crystal clear for those in New York, for those in New Jersey, for those in Philly, for those in Canada, for those in Boston, for those anywhere, as long as they know the Salafi manhaj. So if you're confused about the Salafi manhaj, yes, you will be confused about Tahir Wyatt. If you're confused about the Salafi manhaj and how you deal with these intricate matters when they arise, yes, you will be confused with regards to Tahir Wyatt. And that is why the scholars always urge to learn your deen and not base your deen or connect your deen based on the guidance and the misguidance of a personality. When someone goes astray, you should not be affected by that in terms of it shaking up your manhaj, or you becoming confused on what you're supposed to do. If you do what you're responsible for from the beginning, which is to learn the Salafi manhaj and to understand the Salafi manhaj and its principles, you will not waver in times of fitnah, and you will not waver when individuals go astray. You will remain firm because you know that your Islam and your Salafiyah is your connection between you and your Lord, and not your connection between you and a personality. That has to be clear. And so why these things keep happening, and why not just Tahir but a bunch of different people may cause people to become confused, is because brothers are still lacking in knowledge with regards to the Salafi manhaj. And that is the reality. If they took the time to understand the Salafi methodology in the correct manner, the balanced methodology of the Salaf, then they would not waver in these times of fitnah. And if you see those who wavered and those who went astray, whether they went astray in terms of extremism and following the Sa'afiqah, or whether they went astray in terms of leniency and allowing and welcoming all sorts of things that they never used to, that oppose the Salafi manhaj, the manhaj of tamyi', there are those who also wavered there. And so one has to be serious in learning their deen and in protecting their deen from these doubts by learning the deen. يعني al-maghrib min al-fitan huwa talab al-ilm al-shar'i. The way that one saves themselves from fitan, trials and tribulations, especially those with regards to the deen, is by seeking legislative knowledge. نعم أخي بارك الله فيك. You're right, you're 100% right about that. And let me just clarify, because the last point 10, where I discussed the ruling, I clarified in there, and I said because I referred to your quote, and I said that you said ruling. So I didn't attribute to you that you said no student can talk about a scholar. So I just want to clarify that I don't believe that you said that. But the reason I mentioned the whole detail is just for the sake of clarification. So I mentioned both sides just for the sake of clarification, to show the difference between when the student can talk and refute, and that the student and that the scholar is the one that gives the ruling. And I know that you said ruling, and that is why I addressed that topic, because no one has given a ruling actually. When you said ruling, the reason I addressed this is because no one has given a ruling. All that has happened is brothers actually criticizing or refuting some of the aspects or the oppositions that Tahir has fallen into. That's one. Number two, you're 100% correct. When you say that no one has broken down these things in detail in order for it to be clear for the layman Muslims or the layman Salafis, and that is why there's a lot of confusion that exists regarding Tahir Wyatt and his condition. You're 100% right when it comes to that. That this affair hasn't been dealt with and it hasn't been given the proper attention from all angles. That is correct. And there was a point that I actually forgot to mention, which is why has this confusion actually occurred? And that is because those who were at the forefront of refuting Tahir, which was these brothers at Germantown and others, they did not give the affair its due right, its due justice. Because for them, it's not only about deen, it's actually about dunya. They have a personal agenda. They had a personal agenda towards Tahir, and when they would refute him, they didn't do enough to convince those who did not understand these intricate details of the Salafi manhaj and these principles. They didn't do enough to convince them. Instead, there's a lot of shouting, a lot of name calling, a lot of lies sometimes, a lot of exaggerations sometimes. They may bring some evidences sometimes, like who he mixes with, but the people don't know why that's an issue, because a lot of them could be new to Salafiyya, like you said. A lot of them cannot have understood some of these things. So it's as if they were telling people things that they could not understand. And the manhaj of the Sa'afiqa actually caused harm in that respect. Their manhaj in refutation and their ghulu caused a lot of people to turn away from the criticisms against Tahir. And so a lot of the times when people hear criticisms against Tahir, they think, oh, it's just one of those guys who are jealous of him and one of those guys who just insult and slander the Muslims, and that's because most of the time, or a lot of the time, that's what these guys were doing. And so you're right, no one has mentioned this aspect or this issue in detail in that manner, and that is why I saw that today when you brought up these points, that to take the opportunity to do that once and for all and to clarify the issue from every angle, so that brothers find no confusion anymore regarding his affair, inshallah ta'ala. But barakallahu feek for that point and for mentioning that. And also I want to clarify that when I said that the affair is clear for the one who understands the Salafi manhaj and has understood it, and why I started to encourage brothers to learn it, it's for that reason. Because my point remains, when I'm not blaming them for being misguided or that they have issues in their manhaj. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they may not have understood a lot of these issues in the Salafi manhaj or the Salafi principles, and that is why they're confused. Not that they're blameworthy or that they have deviations or that they're not Salafi. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the reason for their confusion is because there's confusion with regards to the Salafi manhaj, meaning some of the principles that I mentioned. If it's the first time someone has heard it, then that would make sense why they're confused about Tahir Wyatt, or why they would think his affair isn't clear. It's because they have never heard it being broken down in this way in detail, answering every angle that people try to defend him with. It hasn't been done in that way before. So hayakumullah akhi, I appreciate the points that you mentioned today, and inshallah ta'ala you benefited from the clarifications, and that the affair has now become clear for you and for anyone else that may have had some points that they wanted clarified. Inshallah they benefited from those points as well. Hayakumullah akhi kareem. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.